Alrighty, guys. Day 4 of coronavirus lessons. I hope everyone can hear me again because I am be using a smart board here. Talking about how an economy operates on its business cycle. If you remember, we had talked about how ultimately we are the people, us as consumers, that cause expansions and contractions to happen, right? When we are spending our money and we are trusting, we create an upward spiral where we buy a lot more stuff. Because of that, producers make more things, which means they hire more people, which means in turn people make more money, which means more people buy things, which causes more people to make things. And we have this beautiful upward spiral. However, we know that can very quickly become a downward spiral when we stop buying things, and in turn, that means producers make less stuff, which means more workers get fired, which means more workers stop buying things, which means more workers get fired, and so forth. Okay, it creates that downward spiral that we do not like. Okay, now what ultimately brings about this is the interaction of supply and demand. Now, you guys thought you were done with supply and demand, but don't you worry, we are still doing it. With supply and demand, when we are looking at it now, though, we are going to do it from what we call an aggregate perspective. That word aggregate means like total. We're going to look at it nationwide, and we are going to see what nationwide supply and demand does. So, for example, when we're talking about aggregate demand, this is the demand of all goods and services, not just the peanut butter or the jelly or whatever we were doing in the early part of the third quarter. We're talking all services, all goods, okay? The general spending of the entire country. When we look at aggregate supply, we're talking the total overall supply of all goods and services produced at a given time. Now with this, just like before, they have an equilibrium. So when aggregate demand and aggregate supply meet each other is where our equilibrium is. Now with this, I do want to keep in mind here that price and quantity have changed a little bit. On the y-axis, instead of just price, now we have price levels. That is because it is hard to actually signify an average price because, for example, like an airplane costs a heck of a lot more than a pencil does, right? So it's kind of hard to like track prices as a number. So we kind of do it as a price level, a general set of prices across the country, okay? For our quantity, our way of measuring the quantity of goods and services produced and bought will be used by real GDP, okay? When we use this chart, let's hope this works, okay? So when we use this chart, we're going to do it exactly like how we had done before with supply and demand, how sometimes it shifts right and sometimes it shifts left. So for example, right now in our current situation, there's a couple things happening with the coronavirus. First, okay, let's start with the supply side. When we're looking at the supply side, because of the fears and the quarantines that are happening, the fear of spreading the virus, a lot of companies have either closed down or limited down how many workers they have. Well, of course, that makes supply shift to the left. Let's see if this writes. Let's see. Nope. Let's try again. There we go. Supply shifts to the left, which when supply shifts to the left, that causes price to increase. So we will have something called inflation, a rise in prices, plus we will have quantity, a drop in GDP, meaning less is going to get produced, and a drop in GDP means that we are entering into a period of contraction. Okay? Now, with that, let's look at the demand side. I don't know how to clear this whole thing, so sorry about that. Okay? Let's look at the demand side. Also changing as a result of coronavirus, right? So with that, demand for a lot of things like trips and vacations and sporting events and all that stuff has gone down, right? And so as a result, demand is shifting to the left. Now, I would say this, if anybody went out to the store, you will notice that in many stores for things like toilet paper, demand is not shifting left. But for the general entire economy, demand is shifted to the left. Are there some things that haven't? Yes. But for the most part, most have. As demand shifts to the left, that causes prices to go down and the GDP to go down as well, also predicting that we could be entering a time period of contraction. But let's say those prices fall so low. Let's say those prices become very, very, very low, and as a result, people like Mr. Cole who want to kind of jump on those opportunities of having very low prices, let's say prices get so low that now I want to start buying again, right? I want to take advantage of this opportunity. That shifts demand to the right, which in turn would cause prices to rise and the GDP to rise as well. So you may be noticing a trend here. Price and GDP are connected to each other. Usually when GDP goes up, a lot of times the prices are going up with that. That is why economists actually like a raise in prices. We'll get into that later on. Okay, but really, a fall in prices is what you really need to be worried about because that's caused by demand going down. Okay, so ultimately, this is how the economy works itself with the supply and the demand. Okay, I have this chart. I know it's kind of hard to see. I don't think it's that incredibly important for you, but it basically shows the correlation between the unemployment rate and GDP. Right, when GDP is going up, the unemployment rate's usually going down. When GDP is going down, the unemployment rate's usually going up. So ultimately, last two slides here we're going to do, why do all these business cycles occur? Like I said, the first one is just people stopping their own spending. Just basic people making their own business decisions. People and their spending has a ripple effect, right? It has that downward spiral that happens. Sometimes a new technology can cause it. Along with this, an interest rate change can do this as well. If you remember, interest rates are the rate at which people borrow money. Well, in order to expand and start a business or to buy a big purchase, you have to have interest rates, right? You have to borrow the interest with that, okay? So if interest rates are rising, that encourages people to not go and borrow money to try and expand, meaning it's promoting a contraction. When interest rates are falling, that means that it's cheaper to borrow money to go buy a house or start a business. So that's going to promote expansion. Like we said, expectations, right? Us as confident consumers can promote expansion, right? If us as consumers are confident, we'll be. And then I think we all know, especially living in today, this past couple of weeks, external issues such as natural disasters, war, viruses can obviously bring about a recession. Even if the economy is perfectly healthy, things that are out of your control can cause a contraction. Okay, I have a list here of some examples of ones. Obviously, the biggest contraction in our country's history was the Great Depression, but we will study more of these kind of as we go later on. So you guys can kind of ignore that for now, and then I'll let you read these last couple slides on your own. I don't ask about them a whole lot. Okay. So with that, that's going to finish up our stuff over GDP. Great job. Again, email me if you have any questions, guys. See y'all. I miss you.